Hey guys, it's Neil again from Heart of Texas Armory, and today I want to bring you guys a review of this Pulsar Solar Titanium Dive Watch. And this watch here might be one of the most underrated and impressive quartz dive watches ever produced. So join me today and find out my complete thoughts on this really cool titanium solar dive watch from Pulsar. Taking a look at the specs here of this watch, you'll probably see that the specs here are very impressive, particularly in regards to the technology that's in this watch as well as the dimensions. So this watch does have a bit of a cushion style case, which I'm a big fan of. The case diameter here is right at 42 millimeters. If we include the crown here, you're looking at 44.5. Lug to lug is fairly short at 48 millimeters. Our lug width here for your straps and bracelets, you're looking at 20 millimeters, so very common size. The case thickness here is only 12.5 millimeters, so that's an excellent thickness in my opinion for a dive watch. This is a quartz movement inside this watch, so that's one of the reasons why they're able to keep this under, say, 13 millimeters. And the watch in its current configuration weighs in at 92 grams, set up for my wrist size with this bracelet. And the main reason this watch is under 100 grams in regards to weight is because the construction here of the case is made out of titanium. We do have a nice flat mineral crystal here to protect the dial, so fairly scratch resistant, although I would have preferred a sapphire crystal. Water resistance here is 200 meters, and this is an ISO certified dive watch. You can see that designation clearly marked right here on the dial where it says diver. The lume on this watch is pretty impressive. It actually uses Super Luminova. Being a Pulsar, it is a subsidiary of Seiko, so this watch has a huge advantage because it's able to use a lot of the excellent technology that Seiko has. So the lume here you can see is very bright, particularly when you consider the age of this watch, which this piece in front of you was produced in 1997. We do have a quartz movement inside of this watch, and it's actually a Seiko V145 solar quartz movement, and you can see that the tracking on this particular piece is excellent. The seconds hand here is pretty much hitting all of the chapter ring marks dead on, which is always nice to see. Being a solar watch is an excellent feature in my opinion because you really don't have to worry about battery changes. This watch here is well over 20 years old, and of course it's using the same original rechargeable battery. And on a full charge, you can get up to 6 months of battery life on this particular movement. And the movement does feature a low power indicator, so if the power on this battery gets down pretty low, the seconds hand will tick along at 2-second intervals to let you know that it is low on power. We do have a titanium 120 click unidirectional bezel on this watch, and it works beautifully and everything lines up perfectly. It's always nice to see a Seiko produced watch where everything lines up perfectly. And from my experience, watches produced by Seiko in the 90s and early 2000s have a much higher likelihood of everything lining up compared to the new production stuff. We do have a nice screw down titanium crown here, and you can see it is slightly recessed into the case, which is a cool effect. And it does have excellent knurling here, so very easy to operate this crown. And the crown does work as you would expect by just unscrewing it here. Clicking out to the first position allows you to change the date, and clicking out one more time to the final position allows you to change the time. The watch does feature a screw down titanium case back, and you can see it does feature all of the relevant information you need about the watch. One of my favorite features about this watch is just how unique it is compared to most other dive watches on the market. So one, we do have a titanium watch, which is always nice in my opinion. I'm a big fan of titanium dive watches. I just like the way that titanium feels on the wrist as well as how light it is. You can see the side profile here is really neat looking in my opinion. So the lugs do sweep down nicely, which allows the watch to really cradle your wrist. The bezel is pretty prominent on this watch. You can see the nice deeply machined grooves on this bezel, which gives excellent grip to this bezel. Very easy to operate. This watch was designed to be used as a dive watch, so even if you had gloves on, this bezel is going to be extremely easy to operate. The watch does feature drilled lugs here, which is a nice touch as well in my opinion. Just makes it easier to change out any bracelets or straps or bands you might want to install on this piece. Zooming in a bit to take a look at the dial and chapter ring, this is another standout feature of this watch. So the dial has excellent layout, very easy to read. The Pac-Man style indices are well done and very unique and just easy to read at a glance. The handset is also a nice touch here. From the bright orange second hand to the really cool hour and minute hand here, it's just another feature that adds more uniqueness to this timepiece. The bright orange enamel chapter ring might be my favorite feature on this watch and really helps it stand out to other dive watches on the market in my opinion. The enamel chapter ring has a nice glossy finish here which I think looks beautiful, and particularly when you take it outside into bright sunlight, that enamel really pops and really adds a lot of character to this timepiece. We do get a frame date window here at the 3 o'clock position, and while there is a bit of text on the dial, I think it's done in a classy fashion that looks pretty good. So the case, the dial, and the overall aesthetics of this watch are really impressive, and it really catapults this watch to the top of my collection. It's certainly one of my favorite timepieces that I own. Now this particular timepiece was produced in the late 90s, my piece here in 1997. I don't think it was produced for too many years. According to my research, looks like 97 and 98 were the only 2 years that this watch was actually produced, which is really a shame as it is a hidden gem in regards to a quartz dive watch in my opinion. And this watch did come in 2 variants, so the one you see in front of you with the orange chapter ring, as far as I can tell, did not come on a bracelet originally. It actually came on a rubber dive strap. The second variant that was available was a blue variant, and you can see a picture of that on the screen now. That particular model did come with a titanium bracelet to match the titanium case. Now the bracelet you see on my watch here is another Pulsar bracelet. You can see it is branded Pulsar, and it is a vintage Jubilee style bracelet, and although it's not a perfect match for this watch here, it does look well enough in my opinion. The only thing is that this bracelet here is constructed out of stainless steel, where of course the watch case is constructed out of titanium. But even though it's not a perfect match, it does work like I mentioned, and it is very comfortable to wear on the wrist. The Jubilee style bracelets are always comfortable on wrist, they articulate beautifully, and in my opinion it really adds to the vintage look and feel of this watch. So to wrap this review up, I'll go ahead and talk about my positives and negatives with this timepiece. So starting off with the positives, we'll talk about the universally wearable dimensions that this timepiece has. So right at 42mm case diameter, 48 lug to lug, 20mm lug width, and a case thickness of 12.5mm. So those dimensions allow this watch to work on a variety of wrist sizes. My wrist is right at 7 inches and it wears perfectly, but I do think this watch would wear beautifully on smaller wrists as well as larger wrists than mine. The V145 Seiko Solar Quartz movement inside this timepiece is also a positive to me. Most of you guys know I love quartz watches, and I also am a huge fan of dive watches. But I'm also a fan of solar movements as well as kinetic movements. So this watch here, having the solar quartz movement, is pretty much maintenance free. The accuracy is really impressive at around plus or minus 10 seconds a month. And when fully charged, you do get up to 6 months of battery life with this movement, which is always impressive. Another positive is the titanium construction of this timepiece. For me, titanium is my favorite material for a dive watch. I do love stainless steel watches as well, but titanium is just more comfortable to wear in my opinion. Titanium, of course, is lighter weight than stainless steel, which is nice. It's also more neutral to temperature fluctuations, so on a hot day, the watch will feel a little cooler than stainless steel would, as well as on a cold day, the titanium is going to feel a bit warmer than stainless steel. And then finally, I'm always a big fan of how titanium looks. So I do like the flat or matte grayish look that titanium gives you. The Lume is also impressive, so for being a watch over 20 years old, Seiko Lume Bright always impresses me. The Lume takes a good charge and it actually lasts throughout the night. So it goes to show you that even over 20 years ago, Seiko definitely knew what they were doing in regards to Lume. And my final positive here is just the overall design and the cool color scheme. Whether you go with the blue version or the version I have here in front of you guys with the orange chapter ring and orange seconds hand, the overall color scheme is just super cool and unique. Out of all the dive watches in my collection, this one here is probably my favorite in regards to how it looks. And the aesthetics of the titanium case and the very pronounced and easy to operate bezel all add up to what I think is probably one of the more unique dive watches on the market, and certainly one of my favorites. And for the negatives, there's not a lot to report on this watch. I really think it is one of the most underrated quartz dive watches ever produced. But if I have to pick a couple of negatives, I'll just mention 3 things. So one, this watch is currently out of production, so they are a bit rare and hard to find. So if you do like the look of this watch, you're gonna have to head over to eBay or some other forums to try to track one down. And they don't pop up very often, so it's unfortunate that this watch here is out of production. And if Pulsar ever did decide to bring this watch back to new production, I would be a day one customer. Another slight negative is that the bezel tension is a bit loose in my opinion. Now, the bezel action is excellent, everything lines up like we talked about before, but I think because the grip on this bezel is so impressive, it actually makes the bezel feel a little looser than it could be. So I think if the bezel tension was tightened up just a little bit, it would be an improvement. But overall, the bezel action is still excellent. It's just a little loose in my opinion. And the final negative I'll mention is that this watch does feature a mineral crystal, and I would have preferred a sapphire crystal as an upgrade just to prevent scratches on the actual crystal. You can see on mine I do have a few minor scratches, but you gotta remember this watch is over 20 years old. But a sapphire crystal would have been a nice upgrade. But in the end here, this is one of my favorite watches in my collection, and in fact it might be my favorite. Like I mentioned, this watch has an excellent set of dimensions and a ton of features that really appeal to me. So you do get the late 90s Seiko build quality, as well as the latest and greatest Seiko technology of the time. So if you're like me and you like quartz dive watches, and you like Seiko watches, and also titanium watches, this watch is a complete home run, and certainly worth investing time tracking one down. So it is a timepiece that I cannot recommend highly enough. Guys, if you have any questions or comments on this timepiece, leave them down below and I'll do my best to answer them. And I'll catch you on the next one. You guys take care.